How fast could you improve your endurance if you trained the right way? That's the question I asked myself a few years ago, and what I found is a game-changing strategy that I'm excited to share with you today. If you've ever struggled to ride faster or longer, there's one specific training method that not many cyclists know about, but it can drastically improve your endurance, making these long rides feel almost effortless. I'm a professional cycling coach with over 12 years of experience, having worked with over 200 cyclists ranging from beginners to pros, and over the years I've discovered some standout patterns and strategies that consistently yield incredible results. In this video, you will learn 3 key things: a proven science-backed method to boost your cycling endurance, how your riding experience and training age affect the optimal intensity for endurance rides, and practical steps to fine-tune your endurance training, helping you transition from a good cyclist to a great one. First up, let's talk about a method called intensity metric triangulation. Now, I know it sounds technical, but trust me, it's simpler than it sounds, and it's incredibly effective for riders of all levels. And every cyclist I've ever coached who started taking advantage of this, including myself, saw significant improvements in just a few weeks of using it. And it has been my secret go-to weapon for a couple of years now. This method uses 3 key metrics: power output, heart rate, and a tool called the torque test to help you find the perfect intensity for your rides. Most cyclists are familiar with power and heart rate, but the torque test really is a game changer that most people overlook. It has beginnings back in 1939, so it's not a new idea, but it's just so useful for cyclists. So let me show you how it works. To maximize your endurance training, you should leverage those 3 measures of intensity. So power output, because this measures how much stress you're placing on your body. Your heart rate, this shows you how your body is responding to that stress as strain. And the torque test response, this helps you adjust your intensity based on how well you can torque during a ride, which indicates whether you're riding above or below your aerobic threshold. These metrics can work individually, but using them together allows you to fine-tune your training like never before. The torque test in particular is an easy way to gauge if you're at the right intensity. So simply put, if you can comfortably recite the alphabet while riding, you're likely in your endurance zone. As your effort increases, so will the difficulty in speaking, signaling when you might be pushing too hard. Now that we know about the torque test, how do we use it to our advantage? Or put it another way, how do we use it to maximize your endurance rides? I'll show you exactly how to triangulate your intensity metrics in just a moment, but first, let's discuss something not many people are considering when planning their endurance rides: lactate flux and training intensity. Terms that sound fancy, but essentially it just means how your body handles lactate during exercise. Lactate flux is the balance between how much lactate is produced and how much is cleared. And if production is higher than clearance, lactate levels rise, all of which might lead to working harder and having higher fatigue. So you can see the importance of factoring in lactate flux in your endurance training strategy as a way to optimize performance and delay fatigue. So how can you measure your lactate flux? Well, like normal people, you probably don't have access to a lactate meter. And well, I actually don't recommend you go out and buy a lactate meter either, because like a recent study highlighted, there's a large variability among different handheld blood lactate meters, and some devices having okay accuracy, but all of them having poor measurement reliability. So you're better off adjusting your endurance rides based on your experience level or your training age, as zone 2 or endurance pace really isn't one size fits all. So here's how I categorize cycling experience. Advanced cyclists: if you're an experienced cyclist with say 3 or more years of continuous training, you probably have a higher lactate flux. This means you can clear lactate efficiently at lower intensities, but might accumulate it rapidly at higher intensities. Intermediate cyclists: if you're moderately trained, say between 1 and 3 years of continuous riding experience, you'll probably be able to handle slightly higher intensities without accumulating too much strain. For newer riders with less than a year of riding, higher relative intensities might feel more manageable because your systems aren't yet pushed to the limits. Now that you understand how lactate flux might impact your endurance training and varies with experience levels, how can you apply this to your endurance ride intensity? Well, advanced riders stick to a lower intensity of around 50 to 60% of your threshold to avoid excessive metabolic strain. Intermediate riders ride at around a max of 60 to 70% of your threshold to not overwhelm your system. Beginners, you might find it possible to ride at higher zones from 70 up to 80% of your threshold as your overall power output and strain remain lower, especially for shorter endurance rides. Now, be aware, if you train like this, then in your Zone 2 training, you still want some variation in your endurance intensity. So mixing it up from time to time, depending on the length of your ride and your overall training volume, or even closer to events, aligning workouts to the specific demands of upcoming events. So whether it's long climbs, short climbs, repeated efforts, adapt the session to be as event specific as possible. But again, all of this comes down to one thing. To truly get the most out of each endurance ride, you have to stay in tune with how your session feels subjectively. You'll be amazed at how quickly you can improve by fine-tuning these efforts each week like this. And this is where we come full circle with intensity metric triangulation. By monitoring power, heart rate, and torque test cues, you can continuously adjust and optimize your training in real time. So you know if you're riding at the planned endurance intensity and not putting the extra strain on your system if you don't have to. Of course, this varies depending on your target intensity, but riding at a consistent power may impact your body to a different degree depending on the duration of the ride. For example, it's been shown that heart rate can increase significantly, so 8.2%, and progressively during steady-state endurance rides. And this means we need to monitor and adjust intensity to stay at the right level. Here's a quick guide to applying this method during a steady-state endurance ride for an intermediate rider. Power, aim for 60 to 70% of your threshold. Heart rate, target 70 to 75% of your maximum heart rate for newer riders, or 75 to 80% for more experienced cyclists. And the torque test. At least 4 minutes into your ride, try to recite the alphabet. If you can get through it without needing an extra breath, you're in the right zone. And the trick is to time it so that you finish the alphabet and then you take a breath. And if you get through and don't need to take a breath, it's too easy and you might need to lift the pace. Now, to be more effective with this method, you need to have ways to adjust based on what results you get. And these are the most common reactions you'll see in workouts. Spot on. If all metrics align, keep going, you're on track. Sweet spot, if your heart rate is lower than expected, but your power and torque test are on point, you're in excellent recovery balance. Continue as planned. Time to tweak. If heart rate is higher than normal, adjust your power slightly down to maintain the right strain. Time to fuel. If your torque test is harder than expected with lower heart rate, check your nutrition. Low carbohydrates might be affecting your performance. And red flag, if all metrics are off, consider cutting the ride short or adjusting your training plan to account for fatigue. Now that you know how to maximize your endurance rides, the next step is learning how to optimize your training intervals through a personalized approach. Click on this video to find out exactly how to do that.